Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Meiser Sheni, Perek Aleph, Halacha Beis, and Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Tes. We left off on Daf Tes, Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top of the Amud at the end of the line by the dot. Rabbi Yirmiyah, B'Shem, Rabbi Shmuel, Bar Rabbi Yitzchak, and let's quickly recap where we are at. So let's review the second version, or B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, that number one holds, this is important, that there is no biblical prohibition to use Meiser Sheni funds to purchase a unblemished behema lebasar taiva. Yes, it's preferable to use funds of Meiser Sheni when buying an animal to buy it for a shlamim. It's preferable, it's ideal, but it's not prohibited midoiraisa. However, midrabanan, they made a two-step gezerah. Step number one is exactly what we mentioned, that you may not use ma'os meiser sheni funds to buy a unblemished animal, lebasar taiva. Why did they make that, as we had on Daf Ches Amud Beis? Because the Chachamim saw at a certain point that no one was buying it l'shlamim. In other words, when Hashem says there is something preferable, the Chachamim wouldn't have gotten involved if at least some people would have done the preferable, even if maybe most people wouldn't have done it. But when it came to a point that no one was using the money when they were buying an animal to buy it as a carbon, everyone, if they bought an animal, bought it just for them to consume, the Chachamim says no more. If you're buying an animal that's fit to go on the altar, then you have to buy it l'shlamim ma'akev. You are not allowed to buy it for your own personal. And if you did, that was the whole machlekes that we had in the last 2 days between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan. Either let Rabbi Lazar, the whole sale is undone, the koyach of the chachamim, or let Rabbi Yochanan, no, the sale is not undone, and now the animal has kedushas meiser sheni. Elama, we don't say havla. So therefore, the oir will also be imbued with mois meiser sheni, and that's it. We'll put that to rest. Now, the second step of the gezerah, according to this B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, is that once the Chachamim said, if you're buying an animal, you are not allowed to buy a unblemished animal, if not for a carbon, they went further, according to this version of Rabbi Yochanan, that if you are buying a living animal, I don't care whether it's a behema, I don't care whether it's blemished or unblemished, I don't care if it's a chaya, I don't care if it's a bird. Guys, a chaya is never good for a carbon. Oifois are not good for a shlamim. They're good for a chatas, for an oilo sometimes. Even animals that are unfit, at some point the Chachamim said, and it's all a hemshech of this, it's all a continuation of the same decree. It all began because people, when they were buying living animals, if they were unblemished, they never bought it for a carbon. So once the Chachamim made a gzeira, you're buying an animal, it has to be a carbon, they extended it, which is really, it's almost, it sounds like a gzeira l'gzeira. It sounds like a very unusual event, where they went all the way. If you're buying meat, no problem. That's important. If I'm buying already kosher meat in the market, that's already slaughtered, ready to eat, of course you can use Meiser Sheni money for that. There was no gzeira there. But if it's a living animal, tamimim, Balamum, Behema, Chayev, Oif. That's the second version of Rabbi Yochanan. Now that's a big chiddush, because in our Mishnah we saw that even though you should not have bought a Behema lebasar taiva, you shouldn't have done that. But the Mishnah says that you can buy a Chaya. So perhaps for that, and we ended last year on top of Daf Tes, the Gemara brought a brisa. Now the brisa is speaking about two dinim, not one din. It's speaking about shvi'is money and meiser sheni money. We're going to focus right now, just in our review, on the meiser sheni money. That I'm not even going to repeat Shitas Rab Meir. That the Chachamim say, if the Chachamim are referring to meiser sheni and not only to the shvi'is money, no, beferish, that if you're using meiser sheni money, you want to buy meat, it has to already be basar shchuta, meat in the butcher. Can't be living, clearly. Can't be living, meaning if it's a living animal, not a behema, not a chaya, not a oif, bein tamim and bein balamuma. Clearly, we have in a brayso such an opinion, and let Rabbi Yochanan, according to this version, that's a derabanan. And maybe our Mishnah was recorded in the Mishnah, we don't know when the Chachamim made that Gezerah. The Mishnah, it could have even been when Rabbi redacted the Mishnah, but the Rebbe is just putting together the words that people were saying. And there were, you were allowed to buy a chay and a oif. Okay, this is where we left off. Now, we're going to touch up the sugya. The complicated was yesterday, but there's going to be some beautiful nuance that we're going to go into until we get to the Mishnah on Daf Tes Amud Aleph. And on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, we're going to begin Halacha Gimel about items that may not be purchased with Mo'is Meiser Sheni. This will be the Mishnah that says that you cannot buy water and melach, not when they're mixed together. We're going to actually learn Pnei Moshe, Rashirilio, Amachloikis as to why. What we quoted, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, we were quoting the Rashirilio's understanding of that halacha. We'll see today another perhaps reason behind that halacha, no problem. But what we will get from the gist of the Mishnah is the following, that there will be times if a person used Meiser Sheni funds and to purchase something that one should not have purchased, there will be times that we're going to say mekachtos. That's going to be said if there was a shoygeg involved. Shoygeg means either I didn't even know that those funds were Meiser Sheni funds. Shoygeg also means I didn't know that I'm not allowed to use Meiser Sheni funds to buy X, Y, or Z. So we're going to see a concept that if I would have known, I never would have done it. At times is enough for us to say the whole sale, it's a mistaken sale. It's a mistaken kinyan. There's no kinyan. And sometimes when we won't say that, what will we say? Sometimes that yoichal kenegdan, which means that the person, the buyer who used the money to buy something, as we'll see, sometimes that which he bought won't even have kedushas ma'aser sheni because you were not allowed to buy it. So that amount of money he has to go out of pocket, take chulin money, and in Yerushalmi buy foods and eat it in Yerushalayim. And when we get to there, we're going to learn a foundational machloekes Rashi Tosfos in Bavli Kedushin to understand exactly what that means when you say Yoichal Keneged. And we'll go into that when we get there. We will also see that lechatchila, let me word it this way, no question, one should not buy food with mo'is meiser sheni outside Yerushalayim. Once you already put it on money, where should you use the money? In Yerushalayim. If you did it outside Yerushalayim, let me say this, at times, b'di'evid, the sale will be effective, but there'll be an exception. That if I bought produce outside Yerushalayim, but so far away from Yerushalayim that by the time I'm going to get to Yerushalayim, the bananas are already brown. The food that I bought is already inedible. There, we're going to say that your purchasing did not affect the pidyon, as we'll see in the Mishnah.
In case you're out of pocket and you have to buy.
And then we'll see either mekach ta'os. Very good. Then we're going to have to go back into that. See, that's the whole thing that we're going to have today, that sometimes we undo it, sometimes yerchal kenegdan, and we're going to have to shed light on that. That's a good kitzur of the whole daf, and let's dive inside. So again, daf Tes Amud Aleph, at the end of the line, 5 lines from the top of the Amud. Guys, remember this b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, the second version. Daf Tes Amud Aleph, and clearly, I mean, we have a braisa to substantiate the second step of the Gezerah. That what? That you can't buy any living animal with mo'is meiser sheni. Now, the braisa did mention not only mo'is meiser sheni. Before we go on, the braisa begins echad shvi'is. We're speaking about money. Money that you have, like we mentioned many times when we learn Masechta Shvi'is, I am not allowed to do business with produce of Shvi'is. But it doesn't mean that I'm never allowed to sell it. Many times I am allowed to sell it. If I gathered food for me to eat today for lunch, which I am allowed to do from anywhere, from Hefker, from my field, from your field, and I have leftovers, I am allowed to sell it. But when I sell it, those funds are imbued with the Shvi'is sanctity. So the Chachamim say, you want to buy food, only buy shchutim. Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah b'shem Rab Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak says in his name, in the name of Rab Shmuel, that Gozru Oisan, why did they make this Gezerah? Shelo Yiru Oisam Adarim Adarim. Now let's right now apply this to Meiser Sheni. Then we'll read in the Marafulda how we apply this to Shavis. I want to say something quickly. Even though by now our Chabura knows that Danny is the Gabai's Bar Mitzvah is Parshas Kisove, so everyone here is familiar with the Videi Meisres, that you, even though you have to separate before you eat, that was the whole last Masechta, but it doesn't mean you have to give it. Once you separated Trumas and Meisres, you can eat the remainder before you gave it to the Kohen or Levi. Nevertheless, there is a limit. What's the limit? Machlokes Rishonim. It's somewhere Pesach time, either Erev Pesach or Erev the last day of Pesach of the 4th year and of the 7th year, that you are chayiv to do bir meisres. You have to give the meisres to the recipients, and then you have to make that whole declaration that I'm a big tzaddik. I did what you wanted, and I fulfilled all your mitzvahs. I want to add something about that. Meiser Sheni, or funds of Meiser Sheni, are meant to be eaten on that year. The Torah says by Meiser Sheni, Shana Shana. And Chazal learned from there, again, that the produce that's designated as Meiser Sheni itself, if that's what you have, it should be eaten that year. Or if you had Mois Meiser Sheni, it should be consumed that year. So he said a Gavaldic thing, that if we would be allowed to buy chayas, like the question is, what chayas are not going to go on the Mizbeach anyways. You can't do the mitzvah of bringing it as a shlamim. Doesn't matter. It's not uncommon when people have livestock for them not to shecht it, for the purpose of creating wealth. The parents will have babies, which will have grandkids. Mitamol, Yaakov Avinu, you'll go from a few, you'll have a lot of animals. And what's wrong with that? By Meiser Sheni, it's a problem. What's a problem? Even though you'll know it's Meiser Sheni, which means you'll know that has Kedushas Meiser Sheni, is that you won't eat it on that year. And let's just read it straight in the Marafulda, the first narrow line, Lirabanan Koyi. Like, why would the Chachamim be so machmer at some point? You can only be machalal these monies on shchutin. Why not on living animals if they're not ro'y to go on the mizbeach? Actually, this same is found in the Bavli Sukkah Daf Mem, that a person sheyisha etzloi legadol v'lodos. If a person is going to have livestock, he might keep them. And the nimtza mashe masroisov, he's going to delay the consumption of the meiser. He doesn't have to say more, because I'm saying when people learn this, they think, it's going to go beyond bir meisres. No, it's even worse than that. Even before you get to the twice in the 7-year cycle, every year you should ideally eat it on that year, and you're not going to do that. Now, what about shviz? So he says, shviz, nami nehena mehem milisasher, the fact that you will become wealthier from Peirosh Shviz, that in itself is prohibited, included in the Isur of you can't do Schoida with Peirosh Shviz. And Chazal learned many things. One of the things is La'achla v'loy l'Schoida. So even though you're allowed to sell it, you're allowed to sell it to make a couple of dollars to go buy a dinner. The moment you invest it and your investment grows, that's part of the Isur of La'achla v'loy l'Schoida. Now let me tell you something. That's not what we understood b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Because what we understood b'shem Rabbi Yochanan is that there was, I know it was a 2-step gezerah, but all of it was because since God wanted for people, preferably, to use the money when you're buying an animal, lezevach shlamim, no one was doing it, so they put their foot down. And they said, no, you're buying an animal. In other words, we understand b'shem Rabbi Yochanan that this is not the reason. The reason is pashut, even though it's very far. It makes more sense to say, you can't buy a tmima lebasar taiva, because the tmima taka should be offered on the mizbeach if it's a behema. But they said nothing. So the reason that was said b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak doesn't jive with the way we understood the b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. That's what the Gemara says. But the Gemara has very beautiful words. And by the way, the whole daf yesterday was these two Amoraim, arguing, talking to each other. So Rab Zeira tells Rabbi Yirmiyah, At kidoin Rab Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak Chaim. Rab Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, who you, Rabbi Yirmiyah, are quoting, he's still living. And how ki'ilu? I'm saying, how dare you? Va'atun talyun bei martu techiyoin. Martu techiyoin means shmatas. You're hanging your shmatas on him. If he wouldn't have been alive, and you're saying something that's of no value, that he said it, you can get away with it. It's almost like once they passed, Mela, everyone says whatever they want to say that the Rebbe said. Go debate with them. But when he's living, how can you do that? You know that he's going to find out and he's going to challenge you. Let me challenge you right now, which is, V'ha'omrin b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, we just learned, that's what we just spoke out. This is the second version, or b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. That really, it's as al gezeda with two steps, but it's all because of the fact that people were b'chlal not buying animal l'zavach shlamim, that afilu tmima gezeda, not because of adarim, beferish not. The gezeda is not even to buy an unblemished animal. Why? That we learn clearly. Why not? Because God wants you to offer it on the Mizbeach. So why are you giving a reason that the Rabbi Yochanan didn't say? That's not the right reason. This is great. So no, it's when Rabbi Yirmiyah said B'Shem Rabbi Shmuel by Yitzchak, that was the Homara Fulda. Rabbi Yirmiyah understood that this reason goes both to explain the Meiser Sheni, because Shana B'Shana, and to explain Shvi'is. But you're wrong. You understood it wrong, and don't put it on him. How dare you hang your rags on Rabbi Shmuel, and he's alive. Now, Rabbi Shmuel by Yitzchak did say it. That's beautiful. Rabbi Ze'er is telling him, you're not wrong in quoting him, but you are applying it in the wrong place. Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak's logic of Adorim was only said regarding Shvi'is, because everything that we learned yesterday, that you have to buy a Meiser Sheni, you have to buy a Zavar, you should preferable, that's not Shaykh to Ma'oi Shvi'is. Dilma means more than Dilma. Lo Yisamart, that the statement of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, that the reason behind the Chachamim is Shelo Yiru Oisam Adorim, was only said regarding Shvi'is. And there, like we mentioned, the problem is La'achla v'lo l'schaira. But you are misapplying it, you're extending it where it does not belong. Now, he said Dilma. Now the Gemara says itself, you know what, Ashkach, we found another Braisa after he made that statement, where the Braisa again quotes Rav Meir and the Chachamim, but in that Braisa, that Braisa only speaks about Shvi'is, and the Braisa that says that Chachamim Oimrim, that you can only use Ma'oi Shvi'is ala Shchutim Bulvad, and the Braisa adds, not to make Adorim, that's Ashkach Toni ala Shvi'is. And that substantiates. No, it's the Braisa that we quoted on top of Daf Tes, that was speaking both about Shvi'is and about Meiser Sheni, did not quote the reason of the Chachamim. You know why? Because it's two different reasons. The Braisa didn't want to quote it. One is because, like we explained, no one was buying Basar L'Zavach Shlamim. Behemel L'Zavach Shlamim. No one was doing it. For Shvi'is was Adorim. Different reason. If I cared, the Braisa that only spoke about Shvi'is, Taka wrote the reason. Beautiful. And that closes this entire sugya. Okay. Now, so what we had in the last Mishnah was basically you're buying items. I know the Temid, when you could, when you can't, but generally it was you're buying an item, both edible and inedible, right? The animal with the hide, the yayin and the kankan. That was that Mishnah. Now the Mishnah is moving on. It's a Seder. The Seder is, what about foods that none of it can be bought with Mois Meiser Sheni? And what are they? So the Mishnah begins with three categories. Halikeach, if a person would want to buy mayim, or not mayim mixed in melach, we already learned that will be okay. Only mayim, or only melach, or uperois hamechubarim lekarka. If a person would wait for your turn to Amid, it is very important. I'll begin first with the Rash Arilio. So Rash Arilio on the left column, right by the Masnisan. Mayim amelach uperois mechubarim. So what's the issue? So mayim oy. First of all, he says oy melach. You see, because not mayim umelach. Sometimes vav means this and that, or it can mean this or that. Here it means this or that. Oy peres hamechubarim. That you can't do that. Why not? V'tama. Everyone has a different reason. The mayim l'shodayu, when water is by itself without being mixed with salt, or if melach is not mixed in food, melach mixed in salt, that added value to the food, melach mixed in food that added value to the food, you could buy with mois meiser sheni. We're speaking about only salt. Why can you not use mois meiser sheni? So he quotes a beferish Gemara in Eruvin, Bavli, Chavav, that hakoil nilkach bekesev meiser chutz min hamayim or min hamelach. Why? The beinon mida de zayin. You quoted this before. Something that has nutritional value. However, that's defined. Again, without water, the nutrients that are in your body won't circulate in your body. So water, the purpose of water is to bring it from here to there. But water in itself, as much as the most important thing that we need to live is water, but it's not mida de zayin. We mentioned that by Eruvin that you cannot use mayim or melach to make a eruv because it has to be mida de zayin. Okay, and peres hamichubarim. I'm just scooting down a couple of lines. Why? Because the chol hamechuber lekarka dinake karka leinyan shvua and ve'ein kesev meiser v'lo yehedish mischalal ala karka, and that's a limud that we have both in the Medrash Toras Kahanim and in Gemara Bavli Perek Hazov Daf Nun Daled. Okay. And here the last line. This is important. V'hanei did these three items loishna shelakachan b'Yerushalayim. We mentioned in our intro, and I'll repeat this. Lachatchila, all of the ma'os meiser sheni should only be used in Yerushalayim to buy what you could buy. You should not buy peiros outside Yerushalayim. But at times, if you did it, it's going to be valid. Not always. But here it doesn't. Mayim or melach or peiros that are mechuber, never. Loishna chutz Yerushalayim, loishna shoigeg, loishna mezid. You can't do that, and it won't be effective. Now, just to note, the Pnei Moshe has another reason, which is amazing, and his reason is halakech mayim melech. So Bigamara Darish, and what we quoted in the Rashidilia was from the Babli. I think he's quoting here the Yerushalmi, and there's another reason. And we just had the pasuk, right? The pasuk has a klal upratu klal. Buy whatever you want. Buy bakar, tzoin, yayin, sheikhar, whatever you want. So when there's a klal upratu klal, the prat somewhat opposite limits. So this is what we learned from the limit that babakar, ubatzoin, ubayayin, ubasheikhar, that they have three characteristics. They are oichel, they're pri mi pri, and they are gedule karka. They're not mechuber lekarka. And therefore, pashut, water and salt is not gedule karka. Didn't grow. You can say that it's a mineral. You can even call it karka, but it's not gedule karka. And when it comes to the last one, so then it's the same one that pashut, that peiros that are mechubarim are karka. It has to be gedule karka. Okay, turning to Daf Tes Amud Beis. And now it's going to get beautiful. So Nachamo, buying peiros outside Yerushalayim is certainly not lachatchila, because all of the funds, once you took the original meiser sheni and you were paid on money, whether through a sale, whether you did it on your own money, those ma'os should be left money up until when you enter the city. That's for sure. But if a person used those funds to buy produce outside Yerushalayim, so was it effective or ineffective? Let's speak about where it's always ineffective. Where is it always ineffective? If I bought produce so far away from Yerushalayim that conforming my means of transportation, by the time these products will get to Yerushalayim, they will already be over the hill. Baruch Dayanamist. My mother would call them mitzvah bananas. That's when they're already bad. But chaparayin, if not, they're going to never go into the garbage. So you got to eat them today, whether you like it or not. So, if you bought peiros, she'einom yecholim lagia liYerushalayim. That means if you're going to say that the pidyon was effective or the chilul was effective, you're going to end up vaday not eating whatever you bought because you can't make it there on time. So that's the fourth case. That's already more nuanced. In all of these four cases, loy kana meiser. Now that's very clear. What does it mean, loy kana meiser? The kinyan was not effective. Look inside the top Marafulda, loy kana maser, loy chale kedushas meiser ala davar hakanui, and v'lo yotzu hamois l'chulen. Now, yes, Danny.
You know, maybe this is premature. Well, what's the general rule if I bought my bananas in Yerushalmi and they got full, like,
If when I bought them they were already inedible,
they were good,
then chaval. But you can't say Meiser Sheni lost. Shouldn't have done it. But
okay, if they go off and whatever.
it's not okay. It would be the kavanah of the guy that bought it should be to eat it.
The problem here is that you bought it, and by the time
It will not. It will never be. There was never a moment. That's right. That's right. Okay. Now, halakeya peros. But you see, halakeya is not across the board. For sure, you should have bought it in Yerushalayim. The next case in the Mishnah will be what happens if you bought peros that will make it to Yerushalayim on time. Don't think it's so pashut because you should not have bought it outside Yerushalayim. So now we say the following differentiation. Shoygeg, remember what I'm saying now. Shoygeg can mean two things. There'll be cases soon where it can only mean one of the two. Doesn't matter. But generally, shoygeg would either mean that I didn't know at the time of the purchase that what the monies that I'm using is ma'os of Meiser Sheni. It's called a shoygeg. Or I knew that I'm using ma'os Meiser Sheni. I never knew, or I forgot the halacha that if I have already mois Meiser Sheni, don't buy anything with it until when you get to Yerushalayim. I forgot that. That's called a shay. Either or. Very much like Shabbos. You didn't know it's a malacha. Shigeg azad and shigeg Shabbos. Didn't know it's Shabbos. Anyways, over here.
What if you bought bananas and you thought they would make it, and then they didn't?
So Danny's asking a question. I think that if objectively it could not have made it there, the sale is not a sale. I think that's an objective thing, not about your knowledge.
There's another level. Let's say you would have made it, but you got delayed. Then
that's something else. Then I think it would be okay. Because when you made the purchase, okay, now, shoygeg, now, one second, let's go one step at a time. It's not so complicated, but a halt cup over here. If there was any type of shoygeg, now guys, don't forget, we're speaking about someone who made a purchase. This has nothing to do with Meiser Sheni. B'chlal, the ardinim, when it comes to making a purchase, that if either one or the other party, there will be times where either or will say, had I known, I never would have done it. There are other kinyanim. Alex is laughing. Maybe he's thinking about marriage. I don't know. I'm just kidding. Had I known. But no laughing matter. But I'm saying that when it comes to a mekach, you have this thing that had I known. What's had I known? Had I known that I was using Meiser Sheni, I never would have done it. We're speaking about someone who wants to keep the mitzvahs properly. Whichever way, had I known that the money was Meiser Sheni money, had I known that you're not allowed to use that money to buy produce chutz Yerushalayim, same idea. So we say yachzeru damim l'mekoydam. Guys, mekach tos pashut. In other words, we know the transaction, which means that what? Which means that the seller has to give back the money. The seller has to give back the money. The buyer has to give back the produce. Everything goes back to where it was. There was never a chilul to begin with. And everyone takes back what was theirs. Now, what happens if Mezid, the person knew it's Meiser Sheni. The person knew that you're supposed to use it in Yerushalayim, but I did it anyways. You can't use mekach tos now. So says the Mishnah, oy bazoi. It was effective. It was effective, which means that the monies that you gave went out l'chulin, means that the peiros that you bought became sanctified with kedusas Meiser Sheni, and therefore you're obligated ya'alu v'yeyochlu b'makoim asher yivchar b'makoim in Yerushalayim. And now another nuance. Now this is beautiful. The original Meiser Sheni produce, or produce that you bought with Meiser Sheni, has to be eaten in Yerushalayim when the temple is standing. What happens pre-third temple standing? What happens? You cannot eat it there. what do you do? We mentioned this when we began this Masechta. So like this is interesting. What do they do right now? They go in all the markets in Eretz Yisrael. You have one coin. The coin doesn't need to be of the same value as the produce. The produce can be $1 billion of produce. The coin can be one nara sheprutela. Doesn't matter. And you say that the sanctity of the Meiser Sheni, you're machalalit on the money, and a chanami, the money has to be destroyed. We throw it into the Yam HaMelech. When am I allowed to redeem produce of a lot of value on a coin of lesser value? That's only allowed if I'm touching the original Meiser Sheni. So when there is no Beis HaMikdash, I won't end up losing the Meiser Sheni. Today, no one wastes the Meiser Sheni. They don't do that. They redeem it on a coin. The coin is wasted. Big deal. One pruta. That's only for the original. Once you already exchanged it on money, and now the money bought produce, this new produce can never be exchanged again. So now there's a new phenomena that if there is no Beis HaMikdash standing, those items have to be left until they decay. So there's going to be a total loss. Again and again is by Shvias, that the Shvias has the only unique halacha that the original remains holy and the last one remains holy. And that was by Shvias. By Meiser Sheni, you're not supposed to do it again and again and again. But what happens if you did? We'll get there. But this thing that we're learning new is that everyone already knows. People don't remember. They'll bring it all together. The original Meiser Sheni, we don't say by the original Meiser Sheni, v'im ein migdash yirkavu. We do say, redeem it on a coin, and the coin has to be yirkavu. But to the benefit, to the advantage that they don't have to have the same shavias. Because I'm only being paid the kedusha, not the value.
So when do we say Irkivu? I'm sorry.
Yirkavu is one. We always say Yirkavu. We always, today also Yirkavu. But how do we do the Yirkavu now, Yakir? We take produce in the market. There's a coin hanging on the marketplace. This is how I remember it. And you read the Nusach. Basically, what you're saying is that wherever the Meiser Sheni is, its Kedusha is being transferred. It's on the coin. The coin is a pruta, and I have $500 worth of produce. I can have $1 billion worth of produce. So there's going to be a yirkavu, but you won't have a total loss. You'll have a loss of one pruta. That's only allowed when you are dealing with the original Meiser Sheni. The moment the Meiser Sheni went through these steps, you transferred into money, and now the money bought fruit. So when the Mishnah is saying v'im ein migdash, it's not only in the case where you bought peiros outside Yerushalmi. You have to know how Rabbi wrote everything. The Rambam didn't write it this way. Rabbi wrote everything together. Regardless, once, whether you bought the fruit the way you should have in Yerushalayim, whether you bought it outside Yerushalayim, but at least yochol lahagia, and there was a mazid, so it's going to be effective whichever way. Once you already have the exchanged Meiser Sheni, you can't redeem it on money. So if you can't eat it, you lose it. That's even better. Yeah.
Invalidated, and well, this maybe, but my question is that if it's invalidated, the transaction has to be reversed.
Yes.
If the buyer of the seller of the produce that should not have been sold sells it again, or
it's not there. We'll get to that. Or it's not there. We'll get to. Very good. Very good. Oh, now, Alex, I'm not answering because we're going to have this case.
I want that produce, and going back to what Miller was asking.
Yes.
Can I just?
Which case? But which case, Alex? Which case are we talking about?
I bought the produce, Shoygate.
Shoygate, okay.
Now fish out the what do you call it?
But, yeah.
It's not there. Can I just then switch it back to money myself?
If you wait another couple of minutes, we'll have a lot more clarity. Not all clarity, but let's first see what the others once said. I want to go into Arashi and Tosfos, which will shed a lot of light in a moment. Give me a second. Now, next case. Here, we're speaking about someone who used Meiser Sheni to buy a behema outside Yerushalayim. Guys, make no mistake. The sugya that we just finished was about buying an animal in Yerushalayim. Here we're speaking about buying it outside Yerushalayim. Halakeyach behema only outside Yerushalayim. So we're going to say the same logic. Now, by the way, a behema is not going to, there's no shelf life. So you're good. So again, if the purchase was b'shoygeg, so we can apply the general rule of mekachtos. not because of my any. This case is because of the Ma'aser Sheni. Then yachseru domeha lemekaimam and mekachtos. But if it was mazid, so what do we say? We say tale v'seyachol b'makim. The animal has now kedushas Ma'aser Sheni, so it has to be taken to Yerushalmi and eaten. Guys, let's go with Rabbi Yechanan's understanding of the last Mishnah, that if you bought a behema in Yerushalayim, we said everything is Ma'aser Sheni, but there we also mentioned that what? That the hide is Ma'aser Sheni. We don't say Havlah. The Mishnah is going to say something similar, but from another angle. Since you did something wrong, you shouldn't have done it. So when there is no Beis HaMikdash, it's not enough for you to bury or to let the meat rot. Even the hide has to rot. That's the word. The Emein Mikdash, tikovered al yedei means with the hide. Had the purchase been done kedasu kedin, then we would have said that the oir is nivla in the sale, havla. And the words that we had in halacha beis in the last Mishnah is that ha'oir yatzel l'chulin. And no Beis HaMikdash, who cares? You can make a use of it. Same idea. It's just another case. What was the sin in the previous Mishnah? That you bought a behema lebasar taiva. What's the mistake over here? That you bought a behema outside Yerushalayim. It's not because you bought a behema, because Ma'aser Sheni Mois, even though we're saying that if it can make it to Yerushalayim, we don't say it's undone. Okay, we don't say it's undone. It wasn't ideal. You went against the ideal. Since you went against the ideal, we don't say havlah. So therefore, all of the animal, both the meat and the oil. Yeah, well, we don't say havlah. It's like a knas. You can say it, or maybe say havlah is like a gift. They just don't give you the gift. Havlah is like a chiddush. We don't apply it, and now everything has to be left to waste. Next case, it's important. And this is back even in Yerushalayim. Okay. Now, we just had, again, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, some of the reasons why you cannot buy Behema Tameya. But I can tell you, not related. Why not related? We spoke before about Chaya and Oif that are Tahidim. In Torah, Tahir means kosher. Now we're learning about something else. You can only use Mois Ma'aser Sheni for Oichel. They're not, Behema Tameya is not Oichel. It's like buying a table. Even though Goyim can eat it, I'm a Yid. Avadim and Karkois, we just had in the beginning of the Mishnah, that it has to be Gedule Karka and not Karka. And Avadim Hukshule Karkois. And Avadim are not edible. Okay. So, first of all, you're not allowed to do that. Period. There's no Shoygig or Mezit. V'in, if you did it, V'im Lakach, Yoichal Kenegdon. Yoichal Kenegdon, which means you got to go ahead and you got to take the equivalent amount of money that you gave to that person. Let's say I had $100. With the $100, I bought a little bird that's tamei. I take a new $100 of chulin and I have to use it in Yerushalayim as if, sounds like, not so simple. So in Bavli, Kedushin, Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph, under the Gemara in Rashi, Divrei Hamaschel Harei Behema Tameya the Adam Yudea, doesn't matter the sugya there. So middle of Rashi quotes this Mishnah, V'tnan Yoichel Kenegdan. So Rashi says like this, that Haloikeach Yikach Ma'ois Mishaloi V'yoimar. The Loikeach, guys, is the guy that had the Mois Ma'aser Sheni. Let's make it clear. You also thought the seller, the buyer. The buyer is the one that bought it with Mois Ma'aser Sheni. So he's saying Gavaldik. Rashi is saying that since you should not have done it, the sale was effective, the sale part, but there wasn't an exchange of Kedusha. Which normally when you make a sale, what happens? The Kedusha of Ma'aser Sheni goes from the money on that item, and the Ma'ois goes out l'chulin. So the seller has money that he can use for whatever he wants. Since you were not allowed to do it, so now you got someone with money that your animal, Stama animal, doesn't have Kedushas Ma'aser Sheni. That money has Ma'aser Sheni. So Yoichal Kenegdan means that you take new money and you make a declaration. Wherever that money is, may the Kedusha of Ma'aser Sheni, of that money, go on this money. And now this money is Takamois Ma'aser Sheni. I'm reading inside the Rashi.
You can go to him and ask him, like, give me these $100 and
According to Rashi, befedish. But here the advantage is, that's what you were saying. What happens if the moicher, because we're going to have, what happens if you can't find the moicher? So in this scenario, v'yoymar, kol mokem shahamois biyad moicher, wherever they are, yihiyu michulalois alelu. So now we're learning that you have an option of not only once, peiros to mo'os in Yerushalmi. No, you have an option that it went from the original peiros on money, and you can take this money and be mechalal it on other money. You can do that. You want to go to Yerushalayim, you don't want to carry silver, you want to carry less weight, gold. So you can make that chilul. And now, in other words, according to Rashi, this money that v'yoichal kenegdon, it's not stam, a knas. You're solving a problem that you created. The moicher has money that the moicher thinks is kosher money. The money is not kosher. The money is ma'aser sheni money. Says Tosfos, the last Tosfos in the Amid, for many reasons. He argues with Rashi, uperush riva, the ein ze elo knasa, the kansula lekeach, avalo oilam hamois kedoshim biyad hamoicher. Can't be mechalal that to here. Can't do that. And Hanami, because of you not being allowed to buy anything other than oichel, there was no chilul. And the moicher has a problem. So really, the Riva says, you have to go find the moicher and let the moicher know, I made a mistake, I gave you mo'is, ma'aser sheni, your money is holy. But if you can't find him, can't find him.
find the money.
Or the moicher cannot find the money. So that problem is not resolved. But the yoichal kenegdon is a pure knas, which means he doesn't allow you to be machalal the monies wherever they are. This is very important machlekes, and let's come back in our mission.
Value of the coin specific. Like
Those coins have kedusha.
the actual coin.
In other words, according to Rashi, you have the way out of the mess that you made. You take new monies, and you say the kedusha of that money goes into this money, and you're good to go.
So the nafkamina is the point of Tosfos, that seller actually
Has kedusha's ma'aser sheni money,
and it found out somehow or whatever.
then he'll be chayv to eat it in Yerushalayim. And we don't say mekachtos. Interesting. He can say, had I known that the money that I'm getting has so many restrictions on it, for some reason we don't say that. All of this has to be understood. Very good. And according to Tosfos, when I yoichal kenegdon, there is no kedushas ma'aser sheni. It's just a knas. It's a din on the gavra. According to Rashi, now you have mo'is ma'aser sheni. Let's at least finish the mission. It's late. It's beautiful. Now next another din before we come back to this. It's like a break. What's the next din? The next din is, I know that we learned yesterday or 2 days ago, the Mishnah Menachos for people that are learning Daf Hayomi Pei Aleph, that a toida could be bought with ma'aser sheni. We do not view a toida, which is a subcategory of shlamim, as an obligatory carbon. Even though arba'a, four categories of people should bring a carbon toida, but that's not a carbon chatas. It's not a carbon nasham. Nor is it a kine zavim, v'kine zavois, v'kine yoldois. And I want to tell you, and some even had the girsa, en chatois, en hashamis. You cannot bring an obligatory carbon, midamei ma'aser sheni. Zivtei shlamim, yes, but you cannot kill 2 birds with 1 stone. She'ein adam poirei achoivoi b'mo'is ma'aser sheni. Can't double dip. And not only that, again, if you bought, let's go with the first step. The monies that you gave were not nischalel on the animal that you bought. You bought a kinem, so you were magdashit. Fine, it has kachim, kedusha. Halavai, you bought the kine stam. If you bought the kine, you already specified, then you'll get into big trouble by the whole masechta when one bird flew into another bird. Okay. But the mois biyad moicher is going to be ma'aser sheni money. L'Rashi, you make the extra chilul. L'Tosfos, you can't. Yoichal kenegdon. And now, Zaklau, kol shuhu, chutz la'achila v'l'shasiya. And now we're adding a nuance in shasiya, which is sicha, smearing olivera, Rabbi Jonathan's olive oil is mamish drinking, midmei ma'aser sheni. Then yoichal kenegdoi. It's not valid. In other words, the Mishnah is explaining why is it that if I bought a behema outside Yerushalayim, we didn't say yoichal kenegdon. We didn't say that. They're shoygeg, mezid, right? because you bought oichel. Problem is, you bought it outside Yerushalayim. Okay. When you bought something that's not oichel, it's never going to be effective at all. And it's 7 o'clock. I wish I could have began the Gemara, but the Gemara has a bomb question. Let me at least say the question by heart. That in our own Mishnah, we did not have a consistency. In other words, in the case of when you bought avadim and karkois and behemoth tameya, which is not oichel, the Mishnah said befedish yoichel kenegden. The Mishnah did not differentiate between shoygig and mezid. We didn't say if you why not say if you bought it b'shoygig, mekachtos at least switch it back. And in the beginning of the Mishnah, let's say in the case where you bought food that would make it to Yerushalayim, then the Mishnah said at omar achin. The Gemara gives two answers. We're already late. Let's go. So at least the first answer. This is very important. So Rabbi Yoina Amar, that for that there's a machlokes between Abchia Bar Yosef and Shmuel. We don't know who said what. One of the answer is kan derech mechira, kan derech chilul. I want to end with this. This is misunderstood. So let's make it clear. When a person buys something, we could say mekachtos. Mekachtos is not only Meiser Sheni related, but many times by a sale, when one has a valid argument to say, had I known, I wouldn't have bought. Had I known, I wouldn't have sold. Had I known, then we say retroactively, the whole thing was a mistake. That is if they made a normal purchase. Now, chilul could mean I didn't even sell it. I owned the animal. I owned the money. I owned the fruits. And I made a statement, made the ma'ois, the kedusha from here go into there. I want to add to that I can make a sale derech chilul, and these will be the words that when I tell I tell the person who's selling me an item. Let's say he's selling me the fruits. I tell him that first of all, the kedusha in my ma'oi should go into your bananas, and the bananas are mine, and the money is yours. That's also called chilul. There is a way of affecting a transaction, not in the normal way when you're buying, I'm buying it. There are times that I tell the other, I really don't want to buy bananas, but I want to be machalal the money. So the kedusha of the money goes into your bananas. And now the money is yours and the bananas are mine. That's not called a sale, that's called derech chilul. And whenever you make such a transaction, you can never say mekachtos. We'll repeat this again and we'll continue tomorrow.